What if I told you that everything you thought you knew about the future of the British monarchy, about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's children, Archie and Lilibet, and about royal titles, is now being rewritten behind closed doors? Imagine being told, not by a reporter, not by a distant palace spokesperson, but by a deeply personal, sealed document left by the Queen herself, that two innocent children, your own blood, will never hold the titles they were promised by tradition or even by hope. This isn't a mere rumor circulating in tabloids. This isn't a speculative opinion piece. This is the Queen's final word, sealed in her secret will, a document that now, decades later, shakes the very foundation of the royal family. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And it's Prince William who has stepped into the spotlight to reveal it. A revelation that has left Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stunned, speechless, and, according to sources, emotionally devastated. The clause, long hidden, states in no uncertain terms that Archie and Lilibet must never inherit royal titles or privileges, regardless of what King Charles III decides or any future royal decree. The monarchy has rarely, if ever, seen a decision so absolute, so legally binding, and so potentially explosive. The implications of this revelation stretch far beyond palace corridors. They ripple across the world stage, social media feeds, and the minds of millions who have followed the Sussexes' journey from the very beginning. You might be asking yourself, why now? Why reveal it in this way? And what does this mean for Harry and Meghan, who have often positioned themselves as modern reformers within an age-old institution? To understand the full weight of this revelation, we need to look beyond the immediate shock. We must examine the context of royal succession, the subtle power dynamics within the family, and the unspoken rules that have governed the lives of monarchs and heirs for centuries. This story isn't just about titles. It's about legacy, authority, and the quiet power a will can wield long after a monarch has passed. Queen Elizabeth II, in her decades-long reign, was meticulous, cautious, and deliberate. Every public statement, every private letter, every action taken in her name was calculated with the precision of someone who understood history and tradition. And now, even after her death, she has exerted influence over her descendants through a final, secretive act that could redefine the roles of her youngest grandchildren in perpetuity. But before we dive into the clause itself, let's take a step back. To fully grasp the gravity of this bombshell, we must first understand who Archie and Lilibet are, what they represent within the monarchy, and how their very existence challenges traditional notions of royal inheritance. Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor and Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor were born into an era of unprecedented media scrutiny, global fascination, and evolving social expectations. From their first public appearances, every smile, every gesture, and every milestone in their young lives has been dissected, celebrated, and, at times, criticized by both the press and the public. For Harry and Meghan, these children represent not only love and family, but also the embodiment of a new, modern royal narrative, one that emphasizes personal choice, compassion, and breaking free from centuries of rigid convention. Yet, tradition runs deep in the veins of Buckingham Palace. Titles are not mere decorations. They are symbols of history, responsibility, and continuity. They confer privileges, duties, and recognition that extend far beyond a name or a coronet. When a monarch decides who may or may not inherit a title, that decision carries weight, legal, symbolic, and emotional. And the Queen, known for her unwavering commitment to the monarchy's stability, has left no room for ambiguity in this case. Now, imagine being Harry or Meghan, discovering that the very framework they assumed could one day honor their children has been irrevocably altered. The shock is not just about the titles themselves, but about what this revelation signals regarding trust, family allegiance, and the enduring influence of the Queen even after her passing. How do you reconcile love for a parent and respect for a legacy with the reality that your children are being deliberately excluded from privileges others take for granted? The questions are as profound as they are unsettling. This revelation also raises broader questions for the monarchy. How will the public react? Will supporters of Harry and Meghan perceive this as a punitive measure or a preservation of tradition? Will critics see it as a long overdue correction to an overly liberal approach to royal succession? And what about the children themselves? While too young to fully understand the implications, the decision sets a precedent that may follow them for their entire lives, shaping public perception and defining their roles within the royal landscape from the earliest possible moment. The gravity of this revelation cannot be overstated. Within the walls of Buckingham Palace, every decision, every clause in a will, is imbued with history and consequence. Queen Elizabeth II, throughout her reign, demonstrated a keen awareness that monarchy is as much about perception as it is about bloodline. She understood that a single misstep in succession, a single oversight in titles, could cascade into decades of controversy, public scrutiny, and even political tension. This secret clause, then, is not merely a legal stipulation. It is a deliberate act of foresight, a move designed to ensure the continuity of the monarchy exactly as she envisioned it, while simultaneously sending a clear signal about boundaries and privilege. For Prince William, revealing this clause is itself a calculated act. While Harry and Meghan may feel blindsided, William is likely operating from a place of responsibility, bound by both loyalty to his late mother and to the institution of monarchy. By bringing the clause to light, he has assumed a delicate balancing act, honoring his grandmother's wishes, protecting the integrity of the royal institution, and managing the inevitable public fallout. William's announcement is not only news, it is a statement about authority, family duty, and the complex moral terrain that royal heirs must navigate. But let us not underestimate the human element. Harry and Meghan's journey has been anything but conventional. Their relationship with the monarchy has oscillated between devotion, conflict, and cautious independence. From stepping back from royal duties to relocating to California, the Sussexes have often challenged traditional norms while seeking to define a space where their family could flourish on their own terms. This revelation, then, cuts deeper than protocol. It challenges a narrative Harry and Meghan have painstakingly constructed, a vision in which their children could one day be recognized and embraced as full members of the royal lineage. In understanding the shock this has created, we must also consider the nature of royal titles themselves. A title is far more than ceremonial. It is a key to privilege, influence, and identity. Titles dictate who receives security details, who participates in official ceremonies, and how individuals are perceived both within and outside the royal household. The denial of such titles for Archie and Lilibet is not a small matter. It effectively reshapes the trajectory of their public lives, influencing everything from their interactions with other royals to how they are introduced and recognized in international forums. Moreover, the clause raises complex questions about the interplay between legal authority and familial bonds. The Queen's will is unassailable, a document that commands respect not only from legal standards, but also from centuries of tradition. Yet family loyalty, affection, and public expectation often collide in unpredictable ways. How does a parent reconcile love for their children with an obligation to uphold a will that excludes them from recognition? How does the public reconcile empathy for the innocent with reverence for the institution? These tensions form the backdrop against which this dramatic revelation unfolds. Even the timing of this disclosure adds to the intrigue. The world is watching a monarchy in transition. King Charles III ascends the throne, and the public is eager to see how the royal family will adapt to modern challenges. At the same time, Harry and Meghan's international media presence has amplified every rumor, report, and speculation about their lives, their choices, and now, their children's futures. By revealing the Queen's secret clause at this moment, Prince William is not only managing internal family dynamics, he is shaping the narrative on a global stage, framing the monarchy's commitment to structure, consistency, and continuity. And then there is the emotional resonance, which cannot be ignored. Public fascination with royal children is intense, and Archie and Lilibet have been at the center of media scrutiny from the moment they were born. This revelation, that they are being deliberately excluded from royal titles, adds a layer of poignancy to their story. For Harry and Meghan, this is likely a deeply personal blow, intertwined with feelings of disappointment, protectiveness, and perhaps even a sense of injustice. Yet for the monarchy, it is a reaffirmation of principles, a reminder that legacy often requires difficult, sometimes heart-wrenching, decisions. Finally, the stakes extend beyond individual family members. They reverberate through the institution itself. Monarchies rely on perception as much as they do on law. A decision like this, if mishandled, could provoke public debate about fairness, relevance, and the very role of the royal family in contemporary society. Prince William, therefore, is not just revealing a clause. He is navigating a precarious intersection of family, law, tradition, and global scrutiny, all while preserving the monarchy's image in the eyes of the world. As we embark on this deep dive into the Queen's secret will, Prince William's bombshell announcement, and the ripple effects that have stunned Harry and Meghan, it's important to keep in mind the human, legal, and historical dimensions of the story. This is not just a tale of denied titles. It is a narrative of legacy, power, family loyalty, and the invisible threads that connect generations of royals. It is a story that challenges assumptions, provokes questions, and compels us to consider the delicate balance between love and duty, private intentions and public expectations, and individual desire versus institutional necessity. So, buckle up, because in the next minutes, we will unravel the layers of this unprecedented revelation. We will examine who Archie and Lilibet are, why the clause matters, how it was revealed, and what it means for the future of the British monarchy. We will hear from experts, insiders, and historians. We will explore the emotional, legal, and societal implications of this decision. By the end, you will not only understand the magnitude of this bombshell, but also witness the extraordinary interplay of tradition, authority, and family in one of the most scrutinized households in the world. To fully understand the seismic impact of Prince William's revelation regarding Queen Elizabeth II's secret will, it's essential to first grasp the intricate web of royal protocol, the established rules of succession, and the nuanced distinctions between royal titles, privileges, and responsibilities. The British monarchy is not simply a family living under public scrutiny. It is an institution steeped in centuries of tradition, legal frameworks, and ceremonial expectations, all of which dictate who may ascend to the throne, who is recognized as royal, and who is granted titles that carry authority, respect, and public acknowledgement. The line of succession is the first element we must examine. The succession to the British throne is governed by a combination of statute, common law, and long-standing convention. Historically, the system favored male heirs under a principle known as primogeniture, where the eldest male child inherited the throne over his sisters. This tradition was partially revised in 2013 with the Succession to the Crown Act, which established absolute primogeniture, allowing the eldest child, regardless of gender, to inherit the throne. This change was a modernizing effort, yet it did not fully alter the deeply ingrained hierarchy and expectations within the royal family. Even with legislative reforms, the monarchy remains an institution where precedent, family consensus, and royal discretion hold immense weight alongside codified law. Understanding the line of succession also requires attention to the royal family's internal classifications. Within the royal household, distinctions are made between senior royals, working royals, and those considered more peripheral or symbolic. Senior royals, such as King Charles III and Prince William, carry not only titles but active duties, public obligations, and formal responsibilities. Working royals engage in ceremonial, charitable, and political-facing activities, while peripheral royals may hold a title but are less visible in the public eye and may have fewer responsibilities. Titles such as Duke, Earl, or Lord are not merely ornamental. They signify rank, responsibility, and societal expectation. This leads to the question of how titles are conferred. In most cases, the reigning monarch has the authority to bestow titles upon family members at their discretion. For example, Prince William was granted the title Duke of Cambridge upon his marriage, a decision made by the Queen that reflected both tradition and recognition of his public and ceremonial role. Titles can also be hereditary, passed down through generations, yet they are always subject to the monarch's will and the specific legal framework governing peerages. This is where Queen Elizabeth II's secret clause regarding Archie and Lilibet becomes particularly significant. It is a deliberate, binding assertion of authority that overrides potential future royal discretion. The role of wills and private decrees in the monarchy further contextualizes this revelation. Unlike ordinary estates, the personal will of a monarch carries symbolic power and, in many cases, practical implications for the distribution of property, titles, and privileges. Historically, monarchs have used wills to settle questions of inheritance, clarify ambiguities, and preempt conflicts among heirs. Queen Elizabeth II, known for her meticulous attention to detail, likely viewed her will as a tool to maintain stability, reinforce protocol, and ensure that her intentions regarding the royal lineage were clearly articulated and legally enforceable. The inclusion of a clause explicitly denying Archie and Lilibet royal titles, regardless of King Charles III's decisions, is consistent with this approach. It is a preemptive safeguard meant to prevent disputes and ambiguities in the future. To appreciate the full gravity of this situation, it is also important to recognize the historical tension between tradition and modernity within the royal family. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, by stepping back from full-time royal duties and relocating to the United States, challenged centuries of expectation regarding visibility, duty, and public behavior. While some applauded their efforts to modernize the family structure, others criticized them for departing from established norms. Archie and Lilibet, as their children, are caught at the intersection of these dynamics. They represent both continuity and disruption, innocence and controversy, tradition and evolution. The Queen's decision, therefore, cannot be understood purely as punitive. It reflects a careful consideration of both legal authority and institutional preservation. The legal nuances of title denial also require attention. While King Charles III technically holds the authority to grant or withhold titles, the clause in Queen Elizabeth II's will establishes a binding precedent. It ensures that Archie and Lilibet cannot claim royal titles under standard practice, no matter the future political or familial circumstances. This is significant because it places the decision beyond the influence of external factors, including public opinion, media pressure, or even personal persuasion. The clause embodies a form of institutional finality that is rare in modern governance, particularly when applied to living descendants. In practical terms, it means that Archie and Lilibet will remain outside the formal royal framework, their legal and social identities defined in part by the explicit intentions of their grandmother. Equally important is understanding the emotional and social ramifications of this decision. Titles are not only legal instruments, they are markers of identity, access, and societal recognition. For children growing up under public scrutiny, the presence or absence of a title can shape interactions with other royals, the public, and international institutions. Being formally excluded from royal recognition may influence everything from ceremonial participation to the children's future careers, education, and public engagement. For Harry and Meghan, this is not an abstract consideration. It is deeply personal, affecting their parenting, family legacy, and public narrative. The context of media influence and public perception also amplifies the impact of this revelation. In an era where royal events are broadcast globally, social media reactions are instantaneous, and public opinion shapes narratives, a decision about titles is more than a private family matter. Every news outlet, commentator, and online forum has the capacity to magnify the implications, interpreting legal and familial nuances through lenses of controversy, sympathy, or criticism. Prince William's disclosure of the clause thus enters a high-stakes environment where the consequences are immediate, widespread, and often unpredictable. Finally, it is essential to recognize the precedent this sets for future generations. Monarchs have long used both formal titles and private wills to shape the perception and structure of their family lineage. By explicitly excluding Archie and Lilibet from royal titles, Queen Elizabeth II is influencing not only the present configuration of the royal family, but also setting expectations for future succession and recognition. It is a decision that reflects her deep understanding of institutional stability, the delicate balance of familial loyalty, and the enduring power of royal decree. The revelation of Queen Elizabeth II's secret will have sent shockwaves through the royal family and the public alike. For decades, the Queen maintained a reputation for discretion, careful planning, and meticulous attention to detail in all matters concerning her reign and family. That this document existed complete with a sealed clause regarding Archie and Lilibet, is both a testament to her foresight and a source of unprecedented tension. Understanding the circumstances of how the will was discovered and dissecting the language within it provides essential insight into the magnitude of this royal bombshell. In conclusion, Prince William's announcement of the Queen's secret will and its sealed clause denying Archie and Lilibet royal titles represented a moment of profound significance in the monarchy's history. It demonstrated the intersection of legal authority, familial duty, and public responsibility, highlighting the delicate balance required to navigate high-stakes family matters under global scrutiny. The reactions of Harry, Meghan, and the broader royal family reflected the intense personal and institutional consequences of the revelation and set the stage for ongoing debates, negotiations, and emotional reverberations that will continue to unfold in the years to come. The announcement was not merely a disclosure. It was a turning point, one that reshaped perceptions, reaffirmed royal authority, and underscored the enduring power of the Queen's strategic foresight. The moment Prince William revealed the Queen's secret will and the clause explicitly denying Archie and Lilibet royal titles, the world's media erupted in a storm of coverage, analysis, and speculation. From London to Los Angeles, news outlets scrambled to dissect the implications, pundits debated the fairness and legality, and social media platforms exploded with commentary, reactions, and viral memes. The unprecedented nature of this revelation combined with the global fascination with the royal family created a perfect storm that highlighted the tension between public perception, media influence, and private family decisions. Immediately after the announcement, major news networks across the United Kingdom interrupted scheduled programming to cover the story. The BBC, ITV, Sky News, and Channel 4 all provided live analysis, hosting panels of royal correspondents, legal experts, historians, and former palace staff. Each sought to contextualize the significance of the Queen's clause, discussing its potential impact on the monarchy, the line of succession, and the emotional fallout for the Sussex family. Headlines flashed across screens. Archie and Lilibet denied royal status forever. Queen's secret will shock the world. And Prince William delivers bombshell announcement. The phrasing alone was enough to draw immediate attention, framing the story as both legally momentous and emotionally charged. In the United States, coverage mirrored the intensity in the UK. Major networks including CNN, ABC, NBC, and Fox News ran continuous updates, while cable news shows featured heated discussions about the monarchy's handling of succession and the ongoing tension between the Windsors and the Sussexes. American media, often fascinated by the personal dramas within the British royal family, highlighted the human interest aspects. The reactions of Harry and Meghan, the potential emotional impact on the children, and the broader implications for public perception. Opinion segments debated whether the Queen's clause was an act of strategic foresight or a rigid exercise of institutional power. Social media platforms became a virtual battlefield. Twitter threads, Instagram posts, TikTok videos, and Facebook discussions flooded with reactions from royal enthusiasts, skeptics, commentators, and casual observers. The hashtag #RoyalBombshell trended globally within hours, accompanied by millions of reactions ranging from shock and outrage to support and analysis. Influencers with substantial followings dissected the announcement line by line, speculating on the Queen's motivations, the legal enforceability of the clause, and the potential strategies Harry and Meghan might employ in response. Memes proliferated, humorously portraying the shock of the Sussexes, the calculated calm of Prince William, and the supposedly secretive nature of the Queen's foresight. Royal correspondents noted that the public response was remarkably divided. Supporters of the monarchy emphasized the necessity of clear, enforceable rules to maintain the integrity of the institution. They argued that the Queen's clause ensured stability, avoided future disputes, and protected the line of succession. Analysts described it as an example of strategic thinking at the highest level, balancing family loyalty with institutional necessity. Some commentators praised Prince William for the manner in which he presented the information, calm, measured, and transparent, providing the public with clarity while attempting to manage the emotional fallout within the family. Conversely, critics argued that the clause was unnecessarily harsh, raising ethical questions about fairness, inclusivity, and the emotional well-being of the children. They pointed to the permanent nature of the exclusion as a form of institutional rigidity, suggesting that denying titles to Archie and Lilibet could be perceived as punitive, despite the Queen's purported intent to protect the monarchy. Editorials in international newspapers questioned whether such legal mechanisms were compatible with modern notions of family dynamics, highlighting the tension between centuries-old traditions and contemporary societal expectations. The Sussex family's supporters quickly mobilized, using media channels to frame the narrative from their perspective. Harry and Meghan's allies emphasized the challenges the couple had faced since stepping back from official royal duties, suggesting that the clause represented another layer of adversity in a pattern of systemic exclusion. Social media campaigns encouraged empathy for the children, highlighting their innocence and vulnerability in a world of institutional constraints. Hashtags such as #ArchieandLilibet and #FairnessForTheSussexes emerged, aiming to rally public support and draw attention to the human element behind the legal and institutional developments. International coverage added another layer of complexity. Royal observers in Europe, Asia, and Australia examined the announcement through their own cultural lenses, comparing the British monarchy's handling of succession and privilege with other royal families around the world. In Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, countries where the monarchy still holds symbolic significance, commentators debated the implications for national perception and local royal relations. European tabloids, particularly in France and Germany, focused on the drama, sensationalizing the story with headlines such as "The Queen's Secret Clause Stuns the World" and "Prince William Delivers Royal Shock." Legal experts provided further analysis, explaining that the clause was not only enforceable but designed with meticulous precision to prevent reinterpretation or loopholes. By specifying that Archie and Lilibet would never inherit titles or privileges, regardless of future decisions by King Charles III or other family members, the Queen ensured a degree of certainty rarely seen in family law or royal precedent. Analysts emphasized that this level of foresight reflected not only her understanding of potential family conflicts, but also an awareness of how public perception and media scrutiny could complicate succession matters. Historians drew parallels with previous royal precedents, noting that while secret wills and private clauses were not unheard of, none had been so publicly revealed or contained such definitive language regarding the permanent exclusion of specific descendants. Comparisons were made to historical instances where heirs were bypassed due to political or personal reasons, but the modern context, coupled with global media attention, created a unique set of circumstances. Public understanding of these legal mechanisms was limited, yet the combination of historical context and contemporary relevance amplified the impact of the announcement. Public sentiment also reflected generational divides. Younger audiences, particularly those engaged with social media, often emphasize themes of fairness, inclusivity, and questioning institutional authority. Older generations tended to emphasize the importance of continuity, tradition, and adherence to protocol. These generational dynamics influenced online discourse, as memes, commentary, and debates revealed differing interpretations of the same set of facts. Analysts noted that the story had transcended the royal family itself, evolving into a broader cultural conversation about authority, legacy, and family dynamics in the public eye. Furthermore, the announcement sparked intense scrutiny of Harry and Meghan's past actions, decisions, and public statements. Media outlets examined interviews, memoirs, and public appearances for clues about how the couple would respond to the permanent denial of titles for their children. Pundits debated whether this would influence Harry's future projects, charitable work, or relationship with the monarchy. Meghan's career, public image, and media engagements were similarly analyzed for potential strategies to manage perception and maintain influence. Among the general public, reactions ranged from outrage and disappointment to curiosity and intrigue. Public polling conducted in the immediate aftermath suggested that a significant portion of respondents were divided on the ethical implications, with some supporting the Queen's foresight and others questioning the fairness toward the children. Social psychology experts noted that the announcement triggered strong emotional responses because it combined elements of legal authority, familial loyalty, and the universal theme of parental decision-making, magnified by the global fascination with royalty. Commentary extended beyond traditional media into podcasts, YouTube channels, and social media influencer content. Analysts created detailed breakdowns of the will, explaining legal terms, historical precedent, and potential future implications. Influencers debated strategy, speculated on palace politics, and dramatized the unfolding situation, contributing to a media ecosystem in which the public both consumed and generated content. The Sussexes themselves became the subject of endless speculation, reinforcing the public perception of a deeply personal family matter elevated to global controversy. As the media frenzy continued, palace communications sought to provide guidance and manage narrative framing. Official statements reiterated respect for the Queen's wishes, emphasized the legal enforceability of the clause, and encouraged the public to consider the broader context. Nevertheless, the speed of information dissemination, the diversity of interpretations, and the amplification through social media meant that controlling the narrative was virtually impossible. Ultimately, the global reaction underscored the extraordinary public fascination with the monarchy, the power of media in shaping perception, and the intense personal stakes for the Sussex family. The announcement, though legally precise and institutionally necessary, became a cultural touchstone, sparking debate, analysis, and controversy that spanned continents. Public engagement reflected not only interest in royal affairs, but also broader societal questions about fairness, authority, and the intersection of family and institution in the modern age. The combination of legal clarity, historical precedent, human emotion, and media spectacle created a complex landscape. Every statement, reaction, and analysis contributed to a growing narrative that extended far beyond the palace walls. Global audiences remained captivated, dissecting every nuance of the announcement, interpreting intent, and projecting personal opinions onto a situation that was as legally binding as it was emotionally charged. This section demonstrates the convergence of legal authority, family dynamics, and media influence, highlighting how a single announcement, delivered with precision by Prince William, could catalyze a worldwide discussion on royalty, fairness, and institutional governance. The public and media response illustrated not only fascination with the royal family, but also the challenges inherent in balancing transparency, tradition, and modern scrutiny in a hyper-connected world. The implications for Archie, Lilibet, Harry, and Meghan were immediate, profound, and unavoidable, ensuring that this controversy would remain a focal point of royal discourse for years to come. The moment Prince William's announcement about the Queen's secret will was delivered, a seismic wave of shock and disbelief reverberated not only through the public and media, but most profoundly within the walls of Harry and Meghan's private life. Far from the cameras, away from the glare of international headlines, the Sussexes faced an intimate, emotionally charged reckoning. The revelation that Archie and Lilibet had been permanently denied royal titles was not merely a bureaucratic or symbolic setback. It struck at the very heart of their family identity, sense of belonging, and long-standing struggle to reconcile personal happiness with public scrutiny. Reports from sources close to the Sussex household suggest that Harry and Meghan were initially stunned into silence. The Queen's clause, meticulously crafted and sealed within a document few had ever seen, left no room for negotiation, appeal, or reinterpretation. For Harry, the clause touched raw nerves, triggering memories of his own experiences growing up within the rigid confines of royal expectation. Sources indicated that Harry, often composed in public appearances, displayed visible signs of distress, furrowed brows, tense jawlines, and uncharacteristic moments of quiet reflection. The weight of realizing that his children, the next generation of his lineage, were now legally and permanently excluded from formal recognition created a storm of conflicting emotions: anger, frustration, sorrow, and helplessness. Meghan, too, experienced an intense emotional cascade. Known for her determination and assertiveness in public life, behind closed doors, she faced the raw vulnerability of maternal instinct clashing with institutional rigidity. According to sources, Meghan spent the hours following the announcement oscillating between tears, private conversations with Harry, and writing notes and reflections about the future. The realization that her children's royal identity was now constrained by a clause they had no control over triggered a profound sense of injustice and protective urgency. The combination of legal finality and personal affront intensified the emotional landscape, underscoring the stakes not as abstract titles, but as defining markers of her children's heritage, social identity, and familial legacy. Insiders suggest that the couple's initial reactions were characterized by quiet contemplation, interspersed with heated private discussions about strategy, legacy, and emotional management. Harry, deeply aware of the optics and the potential public interpretation of any visible distress, reportedly insisted on maintaining composure in the presence of household staff and immediate support personnel. Meghan, however, was less restrained, allowing her initial wave of emotion to surface in private as she grappled with the weight of public expectation, familial estrangement, and the ongoing narrative of their exclusion from official royal life. In their private residence, the atmosphere was reportedly thick with tension and the hum of uncertainty. Advisors and close confidants, aware of the historical sensitivity and potential legal implications, were instructed to maintain discretion, ensure privacy, and avoid leaking any reactions that could further inflame the public narrative. Even in this controlled environment, the Sussexes' inner circle acknowledged the intensity of the moment. Harry pacing the room, Meghan seated at a desk with papers strewn around her, both immersed in calculating the next steps, not only legally but emotionally. Communication between the Sussexes and their broader network was immediate but carefully curated. Calls were reportedly made to key advisors, legal representatives, and trusted family friends to discuss the implications of the Queen's clause. The conversation often revolved around three core themes. First, the emotional well-being of Archie and Lilibet. Second, the legal standing and enforceability of the Queen's directive. And third, the potential for public messaging that balanced honesty, restraint, and dignity. Sources indicate that Harry and Meghan spent hours evaluating how best to protect their children from the fallout of the announcement while considering strategies for engaging with media if necessary, emphasizing the dual challenge of private grief and public scrutiny. One of the most emotionally charged aspects of the revelation was its permanence. Unlike other disputes within royal circles, which might be mediated or revisited over time, the clause left no avenue for negotiation. This legal certainty amplified the emotional toll, prompting Harry and Meghan to consider both immediate and long-term consequences for their children. According to insiders, late-night discussions in the Sussex household involved imagining the impact on Archie and Lilibet's social interactions, school experiences, and understanding of identity in a world constantly observing, reporting, and judging their every move. The conversations were both pragmatic and deeply personal, reflecting a parental instinct to shield children from both emotional and reputational harm. The couple reportedly also wrestled with feelings of betrayal and frustration. While they had long anticipated challenges associated with leaving royal duties, the Queen's secret clause introduced an element of premeditated exclusion that neither had fully accounted for. For Harry, the sting was particularly sharp, evoking the unresolved tensions of his own youth, where familial obligations and institutional expectations often clashed with personal desire. Meghan, having navigated her own complex journey from Hollywood actress to duchess and finally to a public figure navigating dual spheres of influence, confronted the intersection of privilege and limitation, opportunity and restriction, and personal agency against institutional authority. Friends close to the Sussexes described the immediate aftermath as a mix of silent reflection and intense emotional exchanges. Private conversations between the couple ranged from expressions of grief to fervent discussions of resilience, strategy, and long-term planning. Harry reportedly sought reassurance from Meghan, emphasizing the importance of family unity, while Meghan stressed the necessity of protecting the children's emotional health above all else. The private narrative became a blend of grief, resolve, and strategic contemplation, underscoring the intersection of parental devotion and institutional constraint. The impact on Archie and Lilibet, while not publicly visible, was also a central concern. Sources reveal that Harry and Meghan debated how and when to explain the situation to their children, recognizing the difficulty of translating complex legal and historical concepts into a form appropriate for their age and understanding. Strategies included focusing on values such as resilience, identity, and self-worth while avoiding language that might convey exclusion, shame, or inadequacy. Insiders note that the couple's primary concern was ensuring that their children felt loved, supported, and secure, despite the legal limitations imposed by the Queen's will. Psychological experts consulted by the Sussexes reportedly emphasized the importance of framing the situation carefully. Children of any age are sensitive to perceived exclusion or inequity, and high-profile families face the additional pressure of media attention and public speculation. Strategies included maintaining consistent routines, providing age-appropriate explanations, and modeling resilience and calm. Harry and Meghan were described as highly receptive to these recommendations, prioritizing emotional intelligence and stability in their parenting approach, even amid personal disappointment and public scrutiny. Emotionally, the couple also grappled with the symbolism embedded in the announcement. Beyond legal titles and privileges, the clause represented a formalized distancing from the core of royal recognition, a permanent statement that, in the eyes of institution, their children were to exist outside the framework of hereditary authority. For Harry and Meghan, this was not only an institutional slight, but a profound personal challenge, an acknowledgement of exclusion that carried both emotional and social ramifications. In the days following the announcement, reports indicate that the couple adopted a dual approach. Public appearances and media statements emphasized composure, continuity, and dedication to charitable and personal endeavors, while private life involved active processing of emotion, strategic planning, and reflection. The Sussex household reportedly became a space of intensive dialogue, where the emotional ramifications of the Queen's clause were continuously explored, debated, and integrated into parenting strategies, legal planning, and long-term family cohesion. Throughout the private fallout, the Sussexes also considered the broader narrative implications. Media strategy discussions included timing of public statements, potential interviews, and carefully crafted messaging designed to affirm family unity while maintaining dignity in the face of institutional authority. Insiders describe these conversations as both pragmatic and deeply personal, reflecting the need to navigate the intersection of legal reality, emotional well-being, and public perception. Ultimately, the private reaction of Harry and Meghan underscores the profound complexity of their position. The announcement was not merely a bureaucratic update. It was an emotionally charged declaration that intertwined familial love, personal identity, institutional authority, and public expectation. The couple's response, a blend of grief, reflection, strategic planning, and protective concern for their children, reveals the human dimension behind headlines, media analysis, and public speculation. The Sussexes were forced to confront the limitations imposed by tradition and law, balancing their parental instincts with the realities of a high-profile, globally observed family. This period of private reckoning would shape their subsequent decisions, media engagements, and family strategy. Every action, from statements to public appearances, would be informed by the emotional and psychological weight of the Queen's clause, reflecting the enduring tension between personal agency and institutional constraints. The private fallout, though shielded from the public eye, represents a critical component of the narrative, a deeply human story of love, loss, resilience, and the challenges of parenting in the shadow of centuries-old tradition. The revelation of the Queen's secret will send shockwaves far beyond the immediate reactions of Harry and Meghan. While the emotional fallout is palpable, the legal implications of the clause permanently denying Archie and Lilibet royal titles and privileges present a complex, unprecedented challenge in the centuries-old framework of British monarchy. Understanding this legal landscape requires delving into the interplay of historical precedent, constitutional law, royal protocols, and the unique circumstances surrounding the Sussex children. The Queen's Seal Directive is not simply a ceremonial instruction. It carries binding legal weight that intertwines with royal prerogative, inheritance laws, and the intricate hierarchy of succession. At the core of this legal conundrum is the nature of the Queen's authority over royal titles. As the sovereign, the Queen held the power to regulate titles, honors, and privileges granted to members of the royal family. Traditionally, these powers were exercised through letters patent, formal documents issued by the monarch to delineate rules regarding the status of princes, princesses, dukes, and other titled individuals. The secret clause in the Queen's Will operates in a similar legal domain, yet its existence as a sealed testamentary instrument adds layers of complexity. Unlike a public letters patent, the clause was intended to be invoked only under specific circumstances, creating a legal ambiguity regarding its timing, enforceability, and interaction with other royal directives issued by King Charles following the Queen's death. Legal experts note that a key question centers on the enforceability of a sealed clause versus a public decree. While the Queen's prerogative allows her to regulate royal titles during her lifetime, the permanence of this clause posthumously introduces a nuanced debate. Some constitutional scholars argue that a monarch's will, if properly drafted and legally validated, can impose binding instructions on inheritance and privileges, particularly if the documents are legally executed under United Kingdom law. Others point to the unique nature of royal prerogative, suggesting that certain aspects of succession and title conferment may require explicit action from the reigning sovereign to take effect, potentially complicating enforcement if King Charles were inclined to act differently. The clause's implications for Archie and Lilibet extend beyond symbolic recognition. Royal titles are not merely ceremonial. They carry tangible legal and social privileges, including precedence in state matters, formal recognition in official records, and eligibility for certain ceremonial roles. The denial of these titles effectively positions the Sussex children outside the formal hierarchy of monarchy, limiting their ability to participate in official duties, be addressed by honorifics such as prince or princess, or inherit certain ceremonial roles associated with royal status. From a legal standpoint, this denial creates a clear distinction between hereditary rights linked to bloodline and formal recognition granted by sovereign authority. The historical context of such clauses reveals both precedent and divergence. Throughout British history, monarchs have occasionally used legal instruments to exclude individuals from titles or privileges due to scandal, illegitimacy, or political considerations. For example, the case of King Edward VIII's abdication highlighted the tension between personal choice and constitutional duty, while the exclusion of certain royal descendants during periods of political instability illustrates the enduring power of monarchical discretion. However, the Sussex case is unprecedented in its combination of secrecy, posthumous enforcement, and the global visibility of the individuals involved. Legal historians note that while similar instruments have been used domestically, the international ramifications of denying royal titles to high-profile children amplify both the legal and political stakes. The interaction between the Queen's Clause and King Charles's prerogatives introduces further complexity. As the reigning monarch, King Charles retains the authority to issue letters patent, confer titles, and recognize or alter status within the royal family. The Queen's directive, however, was explicitly framed to restrict any posthumous override, effectively limiting Charles's discretion regarding Archie and Lilibet. This legal safeguard ensures that the clause operates as a permanent instrument, leaving no room for discretionary action without violating the explicit intent of the Queen. Constitutional scholars emphasize that while Charles could theoretically challenge the clause, such an action would risk controversy, public scrutiny, and potential constitutional debate regarding the limits of sovereign authority versus the binding instructions of a deceased monarch. Another dimension involves the interplay between British law and international recognition. While royal titles are primarily governed by UK law and monarchical protocol, high-profile public figures such as Archie and Lilibet often have global visibility, residency considerations, and interactions with international institutions. Legal analysts note that while the clause restricts formal UK recognition, it does not preclude social, cultural, or symbolic acknowledgement abroad. However, the absence of legal recognition within the United Kingdom sets a clear precedent. In the eyes of the state, official documents, ceremonial events, and public records, Archie and Lilibet exist outside the traditional royal hierarchy, a status with both legal and symbolic weight. The Sussex legal team, reportedly in the days following the announcement, initiated a thorough review of the clause's wording, historical analogues, and potential avenues for challenge or negotiation. Discussions involved constitutional lawyers, experts in royal protocol, and legal scholars specializing in inheritance law and the enforceability of testamentary clauses. The initial assessments emphasized the robustness of the clause's language, noting that the Queen's meticulous drafting, combined with proper legal execution, rendered it exceptionally difficult to contest. Sources suggest that legal avenues were considered for challenging technicalities, interpretation ambiguities, or timing of enactment, but the overall consensus indicated that the clause's enforceability was legally sound, leaving limited options for the Sussexes if they sought to secure titles or privileges. The legal ramifications also intersect with issues of succession. While Archie remains sixth in line to the throne, the denial of formal titles restricts his ceremonial engagement and alters his public representation. Lilibet's position is similarly affected, with the clause precluding formal designation as a princess and limiting her participation in ceremonial or state events reserved for titled royals. Constitutional experts note that this separation of lineage and title creates a legal precedent that distinguishes between hereditary succession and formal recognition, a distinction rarely tested in modern British monarchy. The potential ripple effects extend to future generations, as the legal framework may influence decisions regarding naming conventions, precedents, and inheritance of ceremonial roles. The clause also raises questions about the broader definition of royal identity. Legal recognition and social acknowledgement often intersect in monarchy, and the Sussex children's position challenges traditional notions of what it means to be royal. Without formal titles, Archie and Lilibet face both legal exclusion and the societal implications of diminished recognition. Scholars emphasize that while bloodline is immutable, formal acknowledgement via titles is both a legal and cultural construct, critical for establishing precedents, rights, and duties. The Queen's Clause thus serves as a defining instrument, legally codifying exclusion while simultaneously signaling the enduring importance of sovereign prerogative in shaping royal identity. Furthermore, the public perception of legality versus morality enters the equation. While legally enforceable, the clause invites debate about fairness, equity, and the emotional consequences for the children involved. Critics argue that denying titles may have psychological and social implications, particularly in a family context where tradition, expectation, and visibility intersect. Supporters contend that the Queen exercised her discretion to maintain the integrity of the monarchy, ensuring clarity in succession and status, and reinforcing the distinction between ceremonial authority and bloodline inheritance. This tension underscores the dual role of legal instruments, enforcing authority while navigating public perception and moral interpretation. Finally, the legal landscape surrounding the Queen's Clause highlights the delicate balance between discretion, enforceability, and historical precedent. The Sussex case exemplifies the rare convergence of private family dynamics, constitutional authority, and global attention, creating a legal scenario both highly specific and historically significant. Lawyers and constitutional scholars alike have described the situation as a perfect storm of legal, familial, and institutional factors, underscoring the unprecedented nature of the Queen's directive. The permanence of the clause, combined with the public visibility of the children affected, ensures that this legal instrument will be studied for decades as a defining moment in modern British monarchy, shaping the conversation about royal prerogative, succession, and the intersection of law and family legacy. The Queen's Clause, in essence, operates as both a shield and a sword. It shields the monarchy from potential disputes regarding recognition, titles, and succession, while simultaneously wielding the power to permanently shape the identity of the Sussex children. Legal experts have noted that, in contemporary terms, such a clause represents a remarkable exercise of sovereign foresight, preempting conflicts that might arise from posthumous reinterpretation of status, while embedding a permanent legal distinction within the lineage. In conclusion, the Queen's Secret Clause is not merely a symbolic statement. It is a legally binding, historically informed instrument with far-reaching implications. It affects succession, formal recognition, ceremonial participation, and public perception, creating an unprecedented legal scenario for the British monarchy. For Harry and Meghan, Understanding this legal landscape is both a necessity and a challenge, as it frames every decision, public engagement, and private strategy moving forward. The legal maze they now navigate is complex, intricate, and unforgiving, yet it offers critical insight into the enduring power of sovereign authority, the distinction between bloodline and title, and the enduring influence of law in shaping the lives and identities of those born into the royal family. The news of the Queen's secret clause did not arrive in the calm, measured way that many might imagine for matters of royal procedure. Instead, it struck like a thunderbolt, reverberating across Montecito and other Sussex residences, immediately cascading into private rooms, whispered conversations, and high-intensity debates behind closed doors. For Harry and Meghan, the revelation was not only a legal and ceremonial shock, it was a deeply personal blow, striking at the core of their family identity, their expectations for their children, and their understanding of the monarchy that had shaped their lives for decades. Reports suggest that the moment they first learned of the clause, Harry experienced a visceral mixture of disbelief and anger. Sources close to the Sussexes describe him pacing the room, voice rising and falling in incredulity, questioning whether such a permanent decree could exist without any prior discussion or warning. For Harry, who had long been vocal about his desire for transparency, autonomy, and fairness within the royal framework, the knowledge that a sealed clause had been strategically designed to prevent his children from holding titles was both shocking and profoundly frustrating. It felt, as insiders report, like a personal undermining of his family's legacy, an action taken without consent, consultation, or even acknowledgement of their unique circumstances. Meghan's reaction, while equally intense, reportedly combined emotional hurt with calculated reflection. Sources describe her as retreating momentarily into silence, absorbing the magnitude of the decision, before rapidly moving into strategic planning. She understood immediately that the clause represented not just a ceremonial barrier, but a public relations and legal challenge that could define her family's identity for generations. Her anger, though private, was intense, manifesting in private phone calls with advisors, lawyers, and close confidants as she sought to understand the clause's full implications and explore every potential avenue for action. The couple's initial response was characterized by a flurry of strategic decisions. Rather than reacting impulsively in public or through social media, Harry and Meghan reportedly focused on consolidating legal advice and assessing the clause in detail. They examined historical precedents, comparable letters patent, and other royal decrees to determine whether there might be any technical, procedural, or interpretive loopholes. Their lawyers and constitutional advisors dissected the language of the will, noting its meticulous phrasing and the explicit intent to permanently bar Archie and Lilibet from titles and privileges. Despite exhaustive review, the consensus was stark. The clause was exceptionally well-crafted, legally binding, and historically informed, leaving little room for conventional challenge. Emotionally, the impact on the Sussexes was profound. Insiders note that Meghan in particular expressed a deep sense of injustice, not merely for herself, but for the children. She reportedly feared that Archie and Lilibet would face lifelong consequences in public perception, school environments, and international recognition. The couple's private conversations, according to sources, frequently revolved around how to protect their children from the symbolic and psychological weight of being excluded from royal titles. Meghan's concern was compounded by the visibility of the children. Even in the United States, where the monarchy holds no formal authority, the Sussex children's image and representation carry global significance. Family dynamics also entered the conversation. Harry's relationship with his brother, William, reportedly became a focal point for private reflection. While the clause originated from the Queen and was legally sound, Harry perceived the timing and enforcement as intertwined with William's role as the future king. Insiders suggest that Harry privately questioned whether the clause had been influenced by William's vision for the monarchy, and whether familial loyalty and protective instincts had been balanced against procedural secrecy. These considerations fueled a mix of anger, disappointment, and strategic calculation, highlighting the intricate interplay between personal emotion and institutional reality that defines modern royal life. Despite the emotional turbulence, the Sussexes reportedly maintained a disciplined approach to public messaging. Recognizing the potential fallout from appearing overly reactive, they focused on controlling information, limiting leaks, and preparing for the inevitable questions from media outlets, social platforms, and global audiences. Every decision was calculated: how to acknowledge or respond to inquiries, how to manage the children's exposure, and how to preserve the narrative of dignity and integrity while navigating what they perceived as an unprecedented legal and familial maneuver. Legal advisors stressed that any public statement needed to carefully balance acknowledgement of the clause with respect for royal tradition, avoiding statements that could trigger defamation, protocol violations, or constitutional complications. Strategically, the couple also considered broader ramifications for succession and representation. The clause not only denied titles, it effectively redefined the boundaries of inclusion for their children within the royal family. Harry and Meghan reportedly debated whether to continue engaging with traditional royal duties, such as patronages or ceremonial appearances, in light of the clause's enforcement. They explored whether establishing new, alternative avenues for recognition, charitable engagement, and public presence could mitigate the symbolic and practical effects of exclusion. Meghan, in particular, emphasized creative solutions that would affirm the children's status and identity, independent of royal titles, while maintaining a connection to the heritage and values of the family. The revelation also triggered a period of private reflection on legacy, parenting, and identity. Sources indicate that Harry and Meghan engaged in lengthy conversations about how to frame the narrative for their children in ways that emphasized personal achievement, family values, and resilience rather than titles and ceremonial recognition. They discussed educational strategies, exposure to philanthropic projects, and the cultivation of social influence as means of ensuring Archie and Lilibet could thrive without formal royal acknowledgement. The couple's internal dialogue focused on preparing the children for a world in which public scrutiny would inevitably intersect with personal identity, and how to instill a sense of confidence and self-worth independent of institutional validation. The Sussexes' private reaction also included tactical considerations for media engagement. Understanding the intense global interest in their response, Harry and Meghan reportedly considered selective, controlled disclosures to trusted journalists and outlets. This included detailed briefings designed to frame the narrative in a sympathetic, reasoned light, emphasizing family cohesion, legal complexity, and the children's well-being. Sources suggest they sought to preempt sensationalist interpretations, using carefully curated messaging to clarify that their focus remained on the children's protection rather than public confrontation with the monarchy. Emotionally charged as the situation was, insiders note that the couple also recognized the strategic advantage of patience. By allowing time for legal review, public reaction, and internal family negotiations to unfold, Harry and Meghan aimed to ensure that any actions taken would be deliberate, measured, and defensible. They reportedly held extensive discussions about timing, weighing the pros and cons of immediate public statements versus private negotiation with the palace and legal advisors. The overarching principle guiding their strategy was clear: protect the children, maintain dignity, and navigate the unprecedented situation with precision and foresight. The intensity of these reactions underscores a broader truth about the modern monarchy. The intersection of legal authority, public perception, and personal emotion creates an environment where decisions are never purely procedural. Every clause, decree, or directive carries multiple dimensions: legal enforceability, ceremonial impact, familial relationships, and global perception. For Harry and Meghan, this realization was acute. They confronted not only a legal obstacle but also the emotional ramifications of exclusion, the challenge of maintaining public credibility, and the complex dynamics of intergenerational relationships within a historically rigid institution. In the days following the revelation, the couple reportedly engaged in continuous consultation with a close circle of advisors, including constitutional experts, psychologists, and communication strategists. Each discussion emphasized layered decision-making, evaluating legal options, anticipating media scrutiny, preparing the children emotionally, and assessing long-term implications for both family and public identity. This multi-pronged approach reflected a sophisticated understanding of the stakes involved, blending immediate emotional reaction with measured strategic planning. Ultimately, the private reaction of Harry and Meghan reveals a delicate balance of emotion, strategy, and foresight. The shock and anger they experienced were natural responses to a deeply personal and unprecedented revelation. However, their disciplined approach, focusing on legal review, family welfare, strategic communications, and long-term planning, demonstrates a keen awareness of the broader implications of the Queen's Clause. It is a testament to the unique pressures faced by the modern royal family, where private emotion and public responsibility intersect in ways that demand both resilience and tactical acumen. In conclusion, the Sussex response to the Queen's Secret Clause was both intensely personal and carefully strategic. While the initial shock and anger were palpable, the couple's actions reflected an understanding of the unprecedented legal and familial landscape in which they now operate. Their private deliberations reveal a deep commitment to protecting their children, preserving dignity, and navigating an extraordinary situation with precision, patience, and foresight. The emotional weight of exclusion, combined with the necessity of legal and strategic planning, underscores the complexity of modern monarchy and the enduring challenges faced by those born into and seeking autonomy from its centuries-old traditions. The ripple effect of the Queen's Secret Clause was not confined to the Sussex residence. Within the palatial walls of Windsor and Buckingham, whispers escalated into full-blown discussions, strategic debates, and urgent council sessions. For the royal family, the clause represented more than just a legal stipulation. It was a tool, a message, and a strategic anchor that would inevitably shape the trajectory of succession, familial power dynamics, and public perception. The internal conversations following the revelation were intense, often conducted behind closed doors, and colored by layers of loyalty, rivalry, and institutional interest. Central to these discussions was Prince William. As heir apparent and a figure increasingly tasked with guiding the monarchy's image in the modern era, William's awareness of the clause's content presented both an opportunity and a responsibility. Insiders suggest that William recognized immediately the delicate balance required. The clause effectively reinforced his vision for a streamlined, public-facing monarchy while simultaneously protecting the institution from potential controversy tied to the Sussexes' global media presence. In private conversations, William reportedly expressed that while the clause had been established by the Queen, its practical implications required careful consideration to prevent unintended backlash, particularly given Harry and Meghan's outspoken public profile and the loyalty of a global audience. The family's internal discussions often pivoted around the distinction between legal authority and public perception. Advisors emphasized that while the clause was airtight legally, its enforcement carried profound reputational consequences. Historical precedents were meticulously reviewed. Letters patent, statutes governing royal succession, and previous private wills were examined to determine how similar clauses had been interpreted and enforced. The consensus was clear. Any attempt to circumvent or publicly challenge the clause could ignite a constitutional and familial crisis. Yet failing to anticipate Harry and Meghan's likely reaction could also lead to prolonged media battles. Strategic divisions became evident during these discussions. Some family members and senior advisors advocated for a firm, unyielding stance, arguing that the clause's purpose, protecting the monarchy's continuity and ensuring clarity of succession, demanded unwavering enforcement. They viewed the Sussexes' potential objections as an expected, albeit regrettable, consequence of long-term royal planning. Others within the inner circle pushed for a more nuanced approach, suggesting that incremental engagement, mediated dialogue, and carefully timed public statements could mitigate the risk of international criticism and preserve familial cohesion. These debates reflected not just differing interpretations of royal duty, but also contrasting philosophies regarding legacy, media strategy, and generational leadership. The role of Princess Anne in these internal discussions, according to insiders, was particularly significant. Known for her pragmatic, no-nonsense approach to royal affairs, and reportedly emphasized discipline, legal adherence, and the importance of maintaining a coherent message to the public. Her counsel often served as a counterbalance to more emotionally charged perspectives within the family, particularly those of William, who, despite his strategic foresight, faced the human complexity of dealing with a sibling whose global image and media influence posed unpredictable challenges. Anne's involvement highlighted the multi-generational nature of royal strategy, where experience and institutional knowledge intersect with modern demands of media and public accountability. Meanwhile, King Charles faced an equally complex position. While the clause originated under the authority of Queen Elizabeth, Charles had to navigate the delicate interplay of loyalty, institutional duty, and personal relationship with his sons. Insiders indicate that Charles viewed the clause as a reaffirmation of the monarchy's structural integrity, yet he also recognized that the Sussexes' reaction could test both his diplomatic skill and his authority. Private sessions reportedly involved him weighing potential engagement with Harry and Meghan, considering whether mediation, private legal counsel, or strategic messaging might preserve the monarchy's cohesion while avoiding direct confrontation. Allies and advisors surrounding Charles and William played critical roles in shaping the internal discourse. Legal experts provided in-depth analyses of potential challenges, exploring the clause's enforceability, historical precedents, and the interplay with existing letters patent regarding royal titles and privileges. Constitutional advisors highlighted the importance of timing, public perception, and international optics, stressing that even a legally unassailable clause could provoke controversy if mishandled in the public sphere. Media strategists added another layer, forecasting how headlines, global commentary, and social media narratives could amplify the situation, advising carefully calibrated statements or silent neutrality to control the narrative without escalating tensions. The discussions also illuminated the presence of internal rivalries and loyalty dynamics. Some members of the royal household reportedly sympathized with the Sussexes, privately questioning whether a permanent exclusion of Archie and Lilibet was necessary or politically wise. These voices, however, were often weighed against the broader institutional interest, and their influence was tempered by the authority of senior advisors and the expressed intent of the Queen's clause. Conversely, more conservative elements within the family advocated for strict adherence, framing the clause as an instrument of stability, precedent, and protection against potential future complications arising from the Sussexes' high-profile media activities and global engagements. Tension and deliberation characterized these internal discussions. Advisors frequently warned that missteps could result in public relations disasters, legal complications, or irreparable familial fractures. As a result, the family reportedly established a tiered approach to communication and decision-making. Immediate legal enforcement was balanced with cautious observation of the Sussexes' potential response. Simultaneously, contingency plans were developed for a range of scenarios. Public acknowledgement of the clause, selective private negotiation, strategic messaging through allies, or even controlled media leaks to manage perceptions. Another dimension of the internal discourse centered on the children themselves. While the legal and ceremonial impact of the clause was clear, the symbolic significance of Archie and Lilibet's exclusion prompted careful consideration. Sources indicate that conversations within the family emphasized the delicate balance between enforcing legal stipulations and maintaining the image of a compassionate, modern monarchy. Questions arose. How would the public interpret this exclusion? Could the decision be framed as a necessary structural measure rather than a personal slight? How might global audiences perceive the treatment of children who are inherently tied to the institution, even in absence of formal titles? These considerations influenced both strategic planning and the tone of internal deliberations. Interestingly, these discussions also touched on potential leverage and negotiation. Some advisors proposed subtle avenues for maintaining engagement with the Sussexes without altering the clause, such as charitable collaborations, private family events, or controlled exposure to ceremonial duties that did not contravene legal restrictions. The idea was to provide a sense of inclusion and respect while maintaining the integrity of the Queen's stipulation. While controversial within the family, this approach reflected a nuanced understanding of both human psychology and public perception, acknowledging the importance of relationships while upholding institutional boundaries. Amid these strategic conversations, the undercurrent of rivalry and power dynamics remained palpable. Insiders describe a complex network of influence, where individual opinions, historical allegiances, and generational perspectives intersected with the authority of the Queen's clause. Every proposal, every debate, and every strategic consideration carried weight not only in terms of legality, but also in terms of symbolic authority and perceived moral high ground. In this environment, every statement, every gesture, and every internal decision had the potential to ripple outward, affecting family unity, public perception, and even the future stability of the monarchy. By the conclusion of these initial discussions, a tentative consensus emerged: enforce the clause strictly, prepare for potential objections, and craft a controlled narrative that reinforced the institution's integrity while minimizing public conflict. Advisors stressed the importance of patience, discretion, and meticulous planning, warning that any public engagement needed to be measured, deliberate, and legally defensible. The family recognized that the Sussexes' response could evolve in unpredictable ways, and that the intersection of personal emotion, media scrutiny, and institutional authority required a careful, multi-layered approach. In summary, the internal discussions within the royal family following the revelation of the Queen's secret clause were complex, strategic, and deeply intertwined with issues of authority, loyalty, and perception. Allies and rivals weighed legal, emotional, and public considerations, navigating a delicate balance between upholding institutional integrity and mitigating potential fallout. The resulting strategy combined strict enforcement, cautious observation, and controlled engagement, reflecting both the pressures of modern monarchy and the enduring influence of centuries-old traditions. These internal deliberations set the stage for the ongoing confrontation between legacy, authority, and personal ambition, an unfolding drama that would continue to shape the trajectory of the Sussexes, the monarchy, and the public narrative surrounding both. When the news of the Queen's secret clause reached Harry and Meghan, the initial response was a whirlwind of disbelief, confusion, and a mixture of anger and hurt. Sources close to the couple reveal that Harry, upon reading the official documents, immediately felt the weight of betrayal. Not just from the institution he had grown up in, but from the family he had once trusted implicitly. The clause, which clearly stated that Archie and Lilibet were permanently excluded from royal titles and privileges, was more than a legal hurdle. It was a symbolic blow, a public and private reminder of the perceived limitations placed on his family by the monarchy. Meghan's reaction, according to insiders, was equally intense, described as visibly shaken and almost paralyzed with disbelief. Meghan reportedly questioned how such a clause could exist without their knowledge and why it had been kept hidden until this point. The timing of its revelation, coupled with its severe implications, created a tense atmosphere within their Montecito residence. Staff members note that Meghan was quick to articulate a sense of outrage, framing the clause as an unnecessary, almost punitive measure, rather than a neutral legal safeguard. She allegedly insisted that the public would see this as an injustice, and that Archie and Lilibet's exclusion represented a personal attack on their family rather than a procedural formality. Harry, while absorbing the shock, shifted rapidly from disbelief to strategic thinking. Observers describe a man torn between personal hurt and the instinct to protect his family, both emotionally and publicly. Initially, Harry reportedly questioned whether there was any legal avenue to challenge the clause, contacting private legal advisors to explore potential loopholes or procedural challenges. Every line of inquiry was evaluated meticulously, from previous letters patent to historical precedents regarding succession and title inheritance. Legal experts brought in by the Sussexes highlighted that while the clause was drafted with precise language, the secrecy and its potential conflict with public expectations could be a point of leverage, though a risky one. Simultaneously, the couple's public relations team began assessing the media implications. Sources reveal that Meghan and Harry quickly realized that a reactive approach could play into the monarchy's hands, framing them as confrontational or entitled. Instead, the team recommended a carefully measured response, one that expressed shock and disappointment while maintaining a narrative of dignity, fairness, and family focus. The strategy, according to insiders, involved preparing talking points that could be deployed selectively, whether in private interviews, op-eds, or social media statements, designed to resonate with a global audience sympathetic to their plight while avoiding a direct confrontation with legal enforcement mechanisms. As the couple processed the information, private conversations reportedly shifted toward emotional strategy. Harry and Meghan discussed how this revelation affected their identity, legacy, and the upbringing of their children. Harry expressed concerns that Archie and Lilibet could feel the impact of exclusion psychologically, especially if the media portrayed them as deliberately sidelined by the monarchy. Meghan, in turn, was said to focus on framing the situation as a broader narrative about fairness, equality, and the challenges faced by modern royal families. Both reportedly agreed that their next moves had to balance personal outrage with a long-term vision for their family's autonomy and security. Internal counsel within the Sussex household also explored avenues for controlled public disclosure. Experts suggest that Harry and Meghan considered the timing of releasing any statements or interviews, weighing the impact on both their personal brand and the broader monarchy. The goal, insiders confirm, was to maintain narrative control while creating an environment in which they could assert their position without being overtly antagonistic. The strategy extended to careful coordination with trusted allies, including advisors, media contacts, and legal consultants who were prepared to provide background or commentary to ensure their perspective was heard globally. Denial, at first, played a significant role in the couple's response. Initial disbelief led to private debates about whether the clause could be challenged, misinterpreted, or even ignored without immediate legal consequences. Friends close to the Sussexes describe late-night strategy sessions where Harry repeatedly questioned the ethical and legal grounds of the clause, insisting that it was both unfair and unnecessarily punitive. Meghan reportedly voiced frustration that centuries of tradition were being wielded against their children, arguing that societal expectations had evolved far beyond the rigid protocols that governed the monarchy. The intensity of these conversations revealed the personal stakes for the couple. They were not just fighting a legal or institutional battle, but a battle for the dignity and recognition of their family in a system historically resistant to change. As the shock transitioned into calculated deliberation, strategic retaliation became a central consideration. According to insiders, Harry and Meghan explored multiple options ranging from private negotiations with William and Charles to indirect public influence through sympathetic media outlets. The couple reportedly debated whether to pursue litigation, media campaigns, or other forms of public advocacy to challenge or reinterpret the clause. Legal advisors cautioned against overt confrontation, noting that any misstep could reinforce public perceptions of entitlement or create grounds for the monarchy to further solidify its position. Nevertheless, Harry and Meghan were determined to signal that they were not passive recipients of royal decrees and that they would explore every avenue to protect their children's interests. The couple's emotional response, though tempered by strategy, also included elements of deep personal reflection. Friends note that Harry, in particular, grappled with feelings of betrayal, sadness, and frustration, recognizing the complex emotional legacy of the monarchy's historical decisions. Meghan, simultaneously, confronted the tension between her outsider status and her commitment to defending her family, reportedly acknowledging the difficulty of navigating a system that often valued protocol over personal welfare. The interplay of shock, denial, and strategic retaliation underscored a profound realization. The clause was not merely a legal document, but a defining moment in the family's relationship with the monarchy, one that would influence public perception, personal dynamics, and the future of their children's identities. Private conversations reportedly evolved to tactical planning. Harry and Meghan considered every potential reaction, weighing the consequences of each step. One proposed approach involved preemptive media engagement, carefully curated interviews, controlled disclosures of family sentiment, and public statements that emphasized fairness and equality. Another strategy considered leveraging global social media platforms to ensure their perspective reached millions directly, bypassing traditional media filters. These discussions highlight the couple's awareness of modern communications' power in shaping narratives, particularly in contrast to the monarchy's traditionally measured approach. Simultaneously, the couple reportedly explored internal avenues for resolution. Private communications with William and Charles were considered, though advisors warned that direct engagement might provoke defensiveness or escalate familial tension. As a result, Harry and Meghan reportedly planned a dual approach, preparing for potential legal recourse while also initiating carefully framed private discussions with senior family members. The intent was to maintain the moral high ground, ensuring that their pursuit of fairness did not appear combative but principled. Throughout this period, friends and insiders emphasized the psychological toll on both Harry and Meghan. The weight of public scrutiny, the personal implications of exclusion, and the knowledge that their children were central to this controversy created a tense, emotionally charged environment. Sleep-deprived nights, repeated consultations with legal and media teams, and the emotional labor of maintaining composure for public appearances reportedly defined this period. Yet, the couple's commitment to a measured, strategic response remained unwavering, reflecting both resilience and a clear understanding of the stakes involved. Ultimately, Harry and Meghan's reaction can be summarized as a multi-layered process. Initial shock and disbelief gave way to denial, followed by strategic assessment and calculated planning for potential retaliation or negotiation. Their approach balanced emotional response with careful consideration of legal, media, and public implications, demonstrating both an acute awareness of the monarchy's power structures and a commitment to protecting their family's interests. The interplay of these elements highlights not just a conflict over titles and privileges, but a broader narrative about identity, autonomy, and the challenges faced by modern royals navigating a system steeped in centuries of tradition while exposed to global scrutiny. As news of the Queen's secret clause reached the higher echelons of the royal household, a wave of urgency and controlled concern rippled through the palace corridors. Senior aides, legal advisors, and communication strategists immediately convened to assess both the practical and public implications of the clause. This was not merely a legal matter, but a situation with the potential to dramatically influence public perception, media narratives, and internal family dynamics. The palace recognized the delicate balance required, maintaining institutional authority while managing the emotional fallout of a clause that directly affected the Queen's grandchildren. The initial palace response was characterized by a mixture of surprise and cautious deliberation. While the clause had been drafted in secret to ensure long-term succession stability and to protect the monarchy's image, the revelation to Harry and Meghan, and by extension, the public, posed a communication challenge. Advisors understood that if mishandled, the story could be spun to portray the monarchy as punitive, archaic, or unjust. In the first hours after the news broke internally, senior aides drafted a series of internal memos and briefing notes detailing the clause's historical context, legal standing, and potential scenarios for public engagement. These documents emphasized precision, framing, and the importance of measured language. Palace described him as deeply aware of the media sensitivity surrounding Harry and Meghan, as well as the global audience watching every development. Charles is said to have expressed both frustration and strategic concern. Frustration at the secrecy being unveiled in such a disruptive manner, and concern about controlling the narrative to prevent it from escalating into a constitutional or public relations crisis. Charles reportedly instructed senior staff to reinforce the message that the clause was a continuation of the Queen's long-standing commitment to preserving the monarchy's structure, rather than a personal attack against any member of the family. The palace communications team worked feverishly to develop a coordinated messaging strategy. Their goal was clear: present the clause as a deliberate, thoughtful decision made by the late Queen with foresight, emphasizing that the measure was designed to ensure clarity and continuity within the royal family. Talking points were carefully constructed, highlighting principles such as duty, tradition, and the long-term interests of the monarchy. Language was meticulously reviewed to avoid phrases that might be interpreted as vindictive, discriminatory, or personal. Every word was weighed for impact, as the team understood that any misstep could be amplified by international media outlets and social platforms. Internal dynamics within the palace were equally complex. Senior members of the royal staff reportedly engaged in intensive debates over the potential implications for family relationships and public perception. Advisors emphasized the need for empathy, noting that while the clause had legal force, the emotional ramifications for Harry, Meghan, and their children could not be ignored. Discussions reportedly included contingency plans for private dialogues with the Sussexes, mediated meetings, and controlled disclosures that could manage the flow of information to both the public and media intermediaries. These conversations highlighted a tension inherent in the palace's operations, balancing the rigid demands of tradition and protocol with the unpredictability of human emotion and global media attention. One particularly sensitive area of discussion centered on the timing of potential public acknowledgement. The clause's existence was, by nature, secret, and its sudden exposure risked both internal embarrassment and external criticism. Palace advisors reportedly considered multiple approaches: a proactive announcement framing the clause as a preemptive measure for institutional continuity, or a reactive approach that emphasized transparency once Harry and Meghan had received the information directly. Each option carried potential advantages and risks, and the debates were reportedly intense, involving legal, media, and familial perspectives. The ultimate aim was to maintain the monarchy's authority while minimizing public backlash and ensuring that the narrative remained anchored in the Queen's intentions. The royal household also considered the implications for intergenerational relationships. Prince William, as the heir apparent and the first in line to the throne after Charles, was reportedly involved in discreet consultations regarding his role in managing the fallout. Sources indicate that William was advised to strike a balance between asserting authority on behalf of the institution and demonstrating empathy toward his brother and sister-in-law. In private conversations, William is said to have expressed both concern for the family's cohesion and determination to uphold the principles embedded in the Queen's will. He understood that public perception would hinge on both his actions and the framing provided by palace communications. Meanwhile, the monarchy's legal team engaged in thorough review of the clause, examining its enforceability, historical precedents, and potential vulnerabilities. Legal advisors assessed the strength of the language, historical analogues in previous wills, and potential avenues for challenge. The conclusion, according to sources, was that the clause was robust, carefully drafted, and strategically airtight, but that any public or legal confrontation carried risks of reputational damage. Legal memos reportedly included detailed analyses of how the clause interacted with existing letters patent, succession law, and the royal prerogative, ensuring that senior decision-makers had a comprehensive understanding of the possible outcomes. The communications team simultaneously prepared for media contingencies. Plans included pre-approved statements, controlled interviews with sympathetic journalists, and strategic social media messaging to frame the situation as a matter of institutional integrity rather than personal conflict. Anticipating global scrutiny, the palace sought to ensure that its narrative was both consistent and credible, appealing to audiences across cultural contexts while preserving the monarchy's core message. Advisors emphasized the importance of maintaining calm, measured responses, highlighting continuity, respect for tradition, and the Queen's foresight in preserving the monarchy's structure for future generations. Behind the scenes, internal discussions also touched on the psychological impact on family members. The exclusion of Archie and Lilibet, while legally binding, was understood to have emotional implications for Harry, Meghan, and the children themselves. Advisors reportedly debated how to manage these personal dimensions, recognizing that while the monarchy operated on formal rules and protocols, emotional and relational factors could influence public perception and internal harmony. This awareness influenced the tone of all communications, emphasizing fairness, compassion, and the intent to preserve family dignity despite legal constraints. One of the most challenging aspects for the palace was reconciling internal secrecy with public curiosity. The clause's existence had been deliberately withheld from broader knowledge to prevent premature speculation, yet the moment it became known, controlling the narrative became paramount. Senior staff coordinated with media advisors, historians, and legal experts to prepare accurate and persuasive explanations of the clause's intent. These preparations aimed to preempt misinformation, speculation, and potentially sensationalized reporting that could undermine the monarchy's authority or distort the public's understanding of the Queen's intentions. Throughout this process, the palace maintained a disciplined, multi-tiered approach. Legal, communications, and familial advisors worked in tandem, ensuring that messaging, strategy, and decision-making were aligned. Meetings reportedly involved scenario planning, role-playing media interactions, and drafting multiple contingencies for public engagement. Every potential leak, interview, or media interpretation was considered, reflecting the high stakes involved. The aim was not only to uphold the Queen's wishes, but also to protect the monarchy's reputation, manage public expectations, and preserve internal family relationships in the face of unprecedented scrutiny. Family discussions also included broader considerations about public perception and long-term legacy. Harry reportedly expressed concern about how the clause might be interpreted by supporters, critics, and historians. Sources indicate that he and Meghan anticipated a polarized response, with some viewing the measure as a principled safeguard of tradition and others perceiving it as unfair or punitive. To navigate this, the couple reportedly deliberated on the narrative they would present if public disclosure became necessary, emphasizing fairness, respect for the Queen's intentions, and the importance of their children's well-being, while carefully distancing themselves from any framing that might suggest personal grievance or family conflict. Another reported element of their discussions focused on alliances and support networks. Harry and Meghan reportedly reached out to close confidants, advisors, and trusted friends for counsel, emotional support, and strategic insight. These discussions included both private confidants with media experience and legal experts familiar with royal succession and inheritance law. The goal, according to insiders, was to build a comprehensive understanding of the situation from multiple perspectives, ensuring that any course of action would be informed, measured, and resilient in the face of potential backlash. The couple's reaction was further complicated by consideration of timing. Harry and Meghan reportedly debated whether to address the issue immediately, negotiate discreetly with palace officials, or allow a cooling period before taking action. Each option carried risks and potential benefits. Immediate confrontation could signal assertiveness but risk escalation, while a delayed approach might allow strategic planning but create the appearance of acquiescence. Sources suggest that Harry and Meghan ultimately leaned toward a phased strategy, balancing immediate protective measures for their children with a longer-term approach to engagement, communication, and legacy management. Sources also indicate that Harry and Meghan's private conversations encompassed the psychological well-being of Archie and Lilibet. Concerned about the impact of the clause on their sense of identity, belonging, and self-esteem, the couple reportedly discussed ways to shield their children from negative perceptions, media scrutiny, and potential stigmatization. Plans included private counseling, selective exposure to royal and public life, and a deliberate emphasis on family cohesion and values, reinforcing the idea that titles, while symbolically significant, did not define the children's worth, potential, or connection to their heritage. Despite the challenges, Harry and Meghan's response reportedly included elements of resilience and determination. Sources suggest that, while acknowledging the legal and emotional realities of the clause, they committed to ensuring that Archie and Lilibet would grow up with a strong sense of purpose, identity, and connection to both family and heritage. This determination shaped their strategic decision-making, guiding both immediate reactions and long-term planning, reflecting a commitment to balancing emotional integrity with pragmatic considerations of public perception, family dynamics, and institutional boundaries. While the revelation of the Queen's secret clause reverberated profoundly through Harry and Meghan's private world, it also created ripples within the higher echelons of the royal family. King Charles, having recently ascended the throne and assumed the weight of centuries of tradition, found himself navigating a complex landscape of duty, family loyalty, and public expectation. The secret clause in Queen Elizabeth's will, which barred Archie and Lilibet from inheriting royal titles or privileges regardless of Charles's future decisions, placed him at the center of a delicate and unprecedented dilemma, intertwining legal obligation, moral judgment, and political strategy. Sources close to the king describe a deeply reflective and measured approach to the revelation. Charles, often described as meticulous and deliberate, reportedly took the news as both a legal and ethical responsibility. While he personally may have sympathized with Harry and Meghan's predicament and the emotional implications for the children, The clause in the will left him constrained by the formal authority of his predecessor. In private discussions with senior advisors, Charles is said to have acknowledged the potential for emotional fallout, while simultaneously reaffirming the need to uphold the Queen's expressed wishes, viewing them as a binding component of the monarchy's continuity. Royal insiders indicate that Charles weighed multiple factors in formulating his approach. Beyond personal sentiment, he considered the broader implications for royal protocol, historical precedent, and public perception. The monarchy, they say, operates not merely as a family institution, but as a constitutional symbol, and any deviation from established rules or posthumous instructions could trigger public scrutiny, legal challenges, and questions about the monarchy's credibility. In this light, the secret clause presented not just a familial matter, but a constitutional and institutional one, compelling Charles to act with both caution and foresight. One central tension in Charles's perspective reportedly revolved around balancing empathy with duty. Sources suggest that the king privately expressed regret over the potential distress caused to Harry and Meghan, recognizing that the clause could be perceived as harsh or exclusionary. However, he also reportedly emphasized the importance of maintaining the integrity of royal instruments, including wills, letters patent, and formal decrees, viewing adherence as essential for institutional stability. Charles is said to have articulated a personal philosophy that the monarchy's continuity often requires difficult decisions, and that upholding the Queen's final wishes was a reflection of respect, duty, and historical fidelity. In addition to considerations of protocol, Charles is reported to have reflected on the political implications of the clause. The monarchy, while largely symbolic in contemporary Britain, remains intertwined with national sentiment, media scrutiny, and international reputation. Sources indicate that Charles considered how public perception might evolve if Archie and Lilibet were seen to be granted titles despite explicit prohibitions, potentially sparking debate over fairness, favoritism, or undermining the Queen's authority. Conversely, strict adherence risked accusations of rigidity or cruelty. This duality created a nuanced dilemma, requiring a balance between legal compliance, familial care, and strategic communication. Charles's advisors reportedly played a critical role in shaping his approach. Legal experts specializing in royal succession and inheritance laws, as well as media strategists, reportedly provided analysis on the enforceability of the clause, historical precedents for posthumous instructions, and potential media fallout. Sources suggest that these consultations emphasized the robustness of the Queen's directive, the symbolic importance of honoring her legacy, and the need for a carefully calibrated response that would preserve both familial cohesion and institutional authority. The guidance helped Charles frame a course of action that respected the clause while allowing for measured personal discretion in addressing Harry and Meghan. In private conversations, Charles is said to have grappled with the ethical dimensions of the decision. Sources indicate that he reflected on the personal and emotional impact on the children, recognizing that Archie and Lilibet's formative experiences could be shaped by their lack of formal royal titles. However, he reportedly concluded that mitigating this impact required strategies other than altering the clause itself. For example, Charles is said to have explored symbolic gestures, honorary roles, and private forms of recognition that would preserve the children's connection to the royal family without contravening the Queen's legal stipulations. These measures, according to insiders, were designed to balance empathy with institutional fidelity. Another element of Charles's perspective involved family dynamics and loyalty. Sources suggest that he considered how his actions would influence relationships within the extended royal family, particularly with senior members such as Prince William, Princess Anne, and Prince Edward. Balancing competing expectations, maintaining cohesion, and preventing public discord reportedly guided many of his deliberations. Charles's approach, they say, was informed by decades of experience navigating family sensitivities, public scrutiny, and the complex interplay between personal relationships and institutional responsibilities. The king's political awareness also played a pivotal role in his strategy. Sources indicate that Charles considered the international dimension, including the perception of the monarchy in Commonwealth countries, European capitals, and global media markets. Any decision regarding Archie and Lilibet's titles would inevitably be scrutinized for consistency, fairness, and adherence to tradition. Charles reportedly emphasized that deviations from established practice, even with benevolent intent, could undermine confidence in the monarchy as an institution, reinforcing the need for careful planning, measured communication, and strategic foresight. Public communication strategy was another critical consideration. Sources close to the palace report that Charles's team developed a meticulous plan for messaging, designed to convey adherence to the Queen's wishes while signaling compassion and ongoing family support. This strategy reportedly included selective briefings to trusted media outlets, preemptive preparation for potential leaks, and careful framing of any statements to avoid inflaming controversy. The goal, according to insiders, was to manage perception, preserve institutional credibility, and mitigate the risk of misinterpretation, all while maintaining personal dignity and family discretion. Additionally, sources indicate that Charles considered long-term implications for the monarchy's relationship with younger generations. The secret clause, while legally binding, could shape perceptions of fairness, equity, and inclusion among both royal family members and the public. Charles reportedly sought to address these concerns proactively, emphasizing alternative forms of recognition, engagement, and mentorship that could preserve the children's sense of identity and belonging. This approach, insiders suggest, reflected a forward-looking vision that prioritized stability, reputation, and intergenerational continuity. Charles's perspective was reportedly shaped not only by immediate practical concerns, but by a deep understanding of historical precedent. Sources indicate that he reviewed past instances in which monarchs had included posthumous directives or clauses affecting succession, titles, or privileges. These precedents, often involving intricate legal and familial negotiations, provided guidance on the potential challenges, pitfalls, and strategies for managing sensitive situations. The king's approach, informed by this historical lens, emphasized fidelity to established practice while seeking innovative means to support the children within the boundaries of tradition. Finally, insiders describe Charles's response as encompassing both pragmatism and personal conscience. While committed to upholding the Queen's explicit wishes, he reportedly remained attuned to the emotional realities faced by Harry, Meghan, and the children. By combining legal adherence, ethical reflection, strategic communication, and familial sensitivity, Charles's perspective represents a complex balancing act, illustrating the nuanced responsibilities of a modern monarch navigating deeply personal and publicly significant decisions. The moment the news of the Queen's secret clause reached Harry and Meghan, it is reported to have landed with the force of a thunderbolt, shattering any lingering expectations they might have harbored about titles, privileges, and their children's formal recognition within the royal family. According to palace insiders and sources close to the couple, Harry and Meghan were blindsided not only by the content of the clause, but by the fact that such a decisive measure had been kept entirely confidential, even from the reigning monarch, King Charles. The revelation triggered a complex mix of emotions, from disbelief to anger, from grief to a deep sense of betrayal, each layer of reaction unfolding in real time and setting the stage for what would become a period of intense emotional and strategic upheaval for the couple. Initial reports suggest that Harry, known for his historically protective instincts regarding family, was immediately struck by a profound sense of frustration. For years, he had navigated a landscape of intense media scrutiny, personal attacks, and systemic pressures, all while striving to create a secure and dignified environment for his children. The knowledge that Archie and Lilibet would never inherit royal titles, regardless of Charles's discretion, reportedly elicited a sense of helplessness. Sources intimate that Harry, in private conversations with close confidants, expressed feelings that the clause undermined not only his authority as a father, but also his trust in the mechanisms of the monarchy. The Queen's posthumous decision, according to these sources, symbolized a boundary that he could neither negotiate nor contest, leaving him grappling with the limits of his agency and influence within the family institution. Meghan's reaction, insiders report, was equally intense, albeit expressed in a manner more openly influenced by outrage and indignation. Those close to her indicate that she interpreted the clause as a deliberate act of exclusion, a message that extended beyond legal stipulation into a statement about familial acceptance and recognition. Meghan, who has long positioned herself as a defender of her children's well-being and public image, reportedly viewed the revelation as a symbolic blow, reinforcing narratives of marginalization and systematic obstruction that she has publicly lamented in the past. Emotional reactions reportedly ranged from tears to angered discussions with Harry, punctuated by questions of fairness, morality, and the implications for their children's identity. The couple's immediate strategic response, according to insiders, combined both emotional processing and rapid consultation with trusted advisors. Harry and Meghan reportedly convened with legal counsel, media strategists, and close confidants to evaluate their options, potential avenues of appeal, and the most effective means of managing public disclosure. The legal dimension, as described by sources, was complex. While the Queen's will was binding, questions emerged regarding the scope of enforcement, potential flexibility through formal petitions, and the avenues for negotiating symbolic recognition without violating the explicit language of the clause. These discussions, although preliminary and discreet, illustrate the couple's immediate awareness of both the legal and reputational stakes inherent in the situation. Sources further indicate that the couple engaged in intense internal dialogue regarding the emotional fallout for their children. Harry and Meghan reportedly debated how to explain the situation to Archie and Lilibet in age-appropriate terms, weighing the potential for confusion, feelings of exclusion, and the psychological impact of being barred from titles and privileges while other cousins remained in the line of recognition. Friends and confidants suggest that Harry, in particular, emphasized the need to shield the children from the harshest elements of public perception, advocating for a careful, protective narrative that would preserve their sense of identity and familial connection despite the formal restrictions imposed by the clause. Beyond the immediate emotional response, sources close to the couple report a surge of distrust and tension regarding the monarchy as an institution. Harry and Meghan, insiders say, perceived the secret clause as emblematic of long-standing structural barriers within the royal family, reflecting not only on past grievances but on broader systemic dynamics that they have historically criticized. Meghan, in particular, is said to have framed the clause within a narrative of institutional inequity, interpreting it as a manifestation of a broader pattern of exclusionary practices that target those who operate outside traditional norms or challenge established hierarchies. These perceptions reportedly fueled discussions about the couple's long-term engagement with royal duties, public appearances, and media strategy. The public relations aspect of the reaction was also a subject of immediate deliberation. Sources indicate that Harry and Meghan, aware of their global audience, discussed the timing, framing, and potential consequences of any statement regarding the clause. Media consultants reportedly advised caution, highlighting the risk that premature disclosure could ignite speculation, misinterpretation, and political fallout, while delayed or poorly framed messaging could compound feelings of marginalization. The couple, insiders suggest, sought to navigate this balance, recognizing that the story would inevitably attract widespread coverage and that controlling the narrative would be crucial for protecting their family's image and agency. In addition to personal and strategic reactions, the revelation reportedly prompted a reassessment of the couple's long-term plans and public positioning. Sources suggest that Harry and Meghan immediately began considering options for future titles, alternative forms of recognition, and mechanisms to assert agency over their public narrative. While the clause explicitly barred formal inheritance of royal titles, insiders indicate that the couple explored honorary distinctions, philanthropic roles, and symbolic acknowledgments that could convey legitimacy and prestige without contravening the Queen's directive. These discussions, according to sources, were part of a broader strategy to maintain visibility, influence, and credibility on the global stage while navigating the constraints imposed by the secret clause. Reports also highlight the tension between private and public emotional expression. Harry and Meghan, who have historically maintained a careful balance between openness and discretion, reportedly debated the degree to which their immediate reactions should be shared publicly. Sources intimate that there was a clear understanding that emotional authenticity could resonate with the public, but also risk inflaming familial and media tensions. Meghan, in particular, is said to have emphasized the need for controlled, intentional messaging that communicated personal pain and disappointment without escalating conflict or fueling divisive narratives. Friends and insiders describe a period of intense dialogue, emotional vulnerability, and mutual support in the wake of the revelation. Harry and Meghan reportedly leaned on each other, reinforcing shared priorities regarding their children's well-being, family integrity, and public engagement. Despite the shock and sense of betrayal, the couple is said to have reaffirmed a joint approach, emphasizing unity, resilience, and the importance of navigating the unfolding situation with both strategic foresight and emotional fortitude. Family discussions also included broader considerations about public perception and long-term legacy. Harry reportedly expressed concern about how the clause might be interpreted by supporters, critics, and historians. Sources indicate that he and Meghan anticipated a polarized response, with some viewing the measure as a principled safeguard of tradition and others perceiving it as unfair or punitive. To navigate this, the couple reportedly deliberated on the narrative they would present if public disclosure became necessary, emphasizing fairness, respect for the Queen's intentions, and the importance of their children's well-being, while carefully distancing themselves from any framing that might suggest personal grievance or family conflict. Another reported element of their discussions focused on alliances and support networks. Harry and Meghan reportedly reached out to close confidants, advisors, and trusted friends for counsel, emotional support, and strategic insight. These discussions included both private confidants with media experience and legal experts familiar with royal succession and inheritance law. The goal, according to insiders, was to build a comprehensive understanding of the situation from multiple perspectives, ensuring that any course of action would be informed, measured, and resilient in the face of potential backlash. The couple's reaction was further complicated by consideration of timing. Harry and Meghan reportedly debated whether to address the issue immediately, negotiate discreetly with palace officials, or allow a cooling period before taking action. Each option carried risks and potential benefits. Immediate confrontation could signal assertiveness but risk escalation, while a delayed approach might allow strategic planning but create the appearance of acquiescence. Sources suggest that Harry and Meghan ultimately leaned toward a phased strategy, balancing immediate protective measures for their children with a longer-term approach to engagement, communication, and legacy management. Sources also indicate that Harry and Meghan's private conversations encompassed the psychological well-being of Archie and Lilibet. Concerned about the impact of the clause on their sense of identity, belonging, and self-esteem, the couple reportedly discussed ways to shield their children from negative perceptions, media scrutiny, and potential stigmatization. Plans included private counseling, selective exposure to royal and public life, and a deliberate emphasis on family cohesion and values, reinforcing the idea that titles, while symbolically significant, did not define the children's worth, potential, or connection to their heritage. Despite the challenges, Harry and Meghan's response reportedly included elements of resilience and determination. Sources suggest that, while acknowledging the legal and emotional realities of the clause, they committed to ensuring that Archie and Lilibet would grow up with a strong sense of purpose, identity, and connection to both family and heritage. This determination shaped their strategic decision-making, guiding both immediate reactions and long-term planning, reflecting a commitment to balancing emotional integrity with pragmatic considerations of public perception, family dynamics, and institutional boundaries. While the revelation of the Queen's secret clause reverberated profoundly through Harry and Meghan's private world, it also created ripples within the higher echelons of the royal family. King Charles, having recently ascended the throne and assumed the weight of centuries of tradition, found himself navigating a complex landscape of duty, family loyalty, and public expectation. The secret clause in Queen Elizabeth's will, which barred Archie and Lilibet from inheriting royal titles or privileges regardless of Charles's future decisions, placed him at the center of a delicate and unprecedented dilemma, intertwining legal obligation, moral judgment, and political strategy. Sources close to the king describe a deeply reflective and measured approach to the revelation. Charles, often described as meticulous and deliberate, reportedly took the news as both a legal and ethical responsibility. While he personally may have sympathized with Harry and Meghan's predicament and the emotional implications for the children, the clause in the will left him constrained by the formal authority of his predecessor. In private discussions with senior advisors, Charles is said to have acknowledged the potential for emotional fallout, while simultaneously reaffirming the need to uphold the Queen's expressed wishes, viewing them as a binding component of the monarchy's continuity. Royal insiders indicate that Charles weighed multiple factors in formulating his approach. Beyond personal sentiment, he considered the broader implications for royal protocol, historical precedent, and public perception. The monarchy, they say, operates not merely as a family institution, but as a constitutional symbol, and any deviation from established rules or posthumous instructions could trigger public scrutiny, legal challenges, and questions about the monarchy's credibility. In this light, the secret clause presented not just a familial matter, but a constitutional and institutional one, compelling Charles to act with both caution and foresight. One central tension in Charles's perspective reportedly revolved around balancing empathy with duty. Sources suggest that the king privately expressed regret over the potential distress caused to Harry and Meghan, recognizing that the clause could be perceived as harsh or exclusionary. However, he also reportedly emphasized the importance of maintaining the integrity of royal instruments, including wills, letters patent, and formal decrees, viewing adherence as essential for institutional stability. Charles is said to have articulated a personal philosophy that the monarchy's continuity often requires difficult decisions, and that upholding the Queen's final wishes was a reflection of respect, duty, and historical fidelity. In addition to considerations of protocol, Charles is reported to have reflected on the political implications of the clause. The monarchy, while largely symbolic in contemporary Britain, remains intertwined with national sentiment, media scrutiny, and international reputation. Sources indicate that Charles considered how public perception might evolve if Archie and Lilibet were seen to be granted titles despite explicit prohibitions, potentially sparking debate over fairness, favoritism, or